the file opposite day.
All right.
What did you make?
Well,
Late. I'm not gonna give them those. Oh, it's Miss Carol. Hello. Good morning.
morning, good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Really?
And some people bring. Thanks, Bob. After all these years.
Yeah.
Not me.
All right. Good morning, good morning. We get to leap in regardless. The as a destination check, we're here next week, but 2 weeks from today is the first day of Passover. So we'll be here, but we'll be davening instead of so this will be a different vibe. And so here next week, but then off, as it were, all of April. It's a
No class at all in April.
so here next week, and then off all of April. We'll be back, I think, the second week in May, just because Passover, then I'm away. With that, the bracha for Torah study is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvah v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I'm not going to make the joke because there's certain jokes I leave to everyone else.
Well, he's not here.
Right? Yeah. Norm. Yeah. No. It's not it's not that kind of joke.
Oh.
What do you mean I'm not
It is
here?
that today.
What do you mean I'm not here?
Yeah, no, it's not a Trump joke. Don't worry. Today we're going to do the story of Noah. But
Which one?
as we did, which one is the right response? A, B. As you'll see, it's not rain that happens in the Noah story. So I'm not doing the joke because it's raining, but it's not a lot of rain that causes the Noah story, right? Let's see what in fact it is. All right. So Noah, the Parshat Noah, if you're looking at a Chumash that goes by the Parshiot, we'll start last week for those who were here and who weren't cavorting around with fraternizing with the enemy. Was that the subtitle?
If they're our enemy, we should be so lucky.
Nice, good.
Very, very nice.
Nice. Beautifully said. Last week we sort of like picked apart the documentary hypothesis as it applies to the Noah story. Today we'll just sort of like take it on as a whole. Again, you always got to keep two different things going at once. One, like sort of like the history, how did this text come into being, and then there's the what's it actually saying in the form that we have. So Noah, this is the beginning of Parshat Noah. This is chapter 6, beginning verse 9. Chapter 6 of Genesis, beginning verse 9, is the beginning of Parshat Noah. Noah ish tzadik tamim haya b'dorotav. Famous. These are the records of Noah. So the generations of Noah. Noah, each tzaddik, is a righteous man. Tamim haya b'dorotav. Unblemished in his generations. Et Elohim hitalech Noah. Probably with the God, Noah walked. There's a lot that's said on this line. I think maybe most significantly, this is the only person in the entire Tanakh that gets called Ish Tzaddik. No one else is called a Tzaddik. No one else. Of all the characters we'll meet in a pretty thick book, just Noah. So that righteous, yeah, tzaddik, Yeah, so righteous man, good person, so something like that, did the right thing. Tamim hayabadorotav, he was unblemished in his generations, and this is standard drafts that we give on for any and all for this, is that there's a qualifier. He was unblemished in his generation, so the rabbis will ask, does mean Noah was unblemished in his generation, but everyone in his generation was terrible? So does this mean that he was better than terrible? Right. So right, or as I explained to like the high school kids or B'nai Mitzvah students, really like there are a couple of ways of looking at this. If you're the top student in the worst high school in the state, does that mean that if you're put into a decent high school or a good high school, you would be fair to middling? Or does it mean if you can be good in this terrible atmosphere where no one's showing up to school and everyone's shooting up drugs and no one's showing up to class, and in that atmosphere you stand out and you apply yourself, then put you in a setting where like other people are doing the same thing, then you're going to be the best of the best, right? Like, so this is it. Like the best kid in the worst high school is a real moral exemplar. To be a decent student at Bridgewater Raritan High, maybe not such a big deal, right? Because a lot of others are doing it, right? You're following along with the crowd. But if you can break with the crowd, that's really impressive. So you can read that sort of qualification either way. If you're a good person in a bad atmosphere, that's really impressive. Or you can be like, so the rabbis do both with this. If you put Noah in Abraham's generation, not so impressive. Or maybe he would outshine Abraham. Like if you have other no.
But if it was all around why did they put the qualification in his time?
Well, that's just a question, right? Again, if I'm the best student in the worst high school, you can just read it either way. In his time could be that, as we know, like to stand. It's easy to follow others to do the right thing. It's harder to follow others to stand up. I don't know. We're reading all these Nazi books right now. It's easy for me not to be complicit in genocide. I'm living in New Jersey in 2023, right? But the people living there to stand up meant something, right? Well, there are consequences. Everyone would hate you. All this other stuff, right? Like so that I actually do think you could read this 100% either way, and like you can have the one that you like most, but the opposite of the one you like most, all is sort of like equally accurate.
In front of your laptop, the three stack books that
Yeah. Right. Well, you got to read the book. Yeah. No. So what I would say, so he actually comes up with an answer. I don't know if it's entirely accurate. Or if it's still like the state of the art, as it were. But if you and we can do, we can do summer. It would be logical in every year, I think of it, that we could do like summer book group with this in particular, to walk people through it. Pardon me? Yes. Yeah. But the on one foot version is that guys like him, university scholar types, say that the Torah came from multiple early sources and was edited into its current form, the form that we have here in the Ark, say, or in the book in front of you, around the time of the first exile, Babylonian exile, and that those who were like the scribal class at that time would have been the ones who collected it into its current form.
Logical sense of study, because there's certain, it seems like the story sometimes picks up in a different thread, and it ends in a strange way and picks up in another one.
Right. Yeah. And you'd say sort of like, again, like sort of the blending of like different conceptions of God may have been dominant in different areas at different times. And those can coexist. Actually, like you can see the same thing goes on in our society. Like different ideas can coexist when you're at a distance from each other. But with the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel, and in 722 BCE, the Assyrians take over the northern kingdom and destroy it, and the remnants, 10 tribes are sort of like spread throughout, but many of them become refugees and move into the southern kingdom of Judah, the smaller southern kingdom of Judah, and if they had two parallel stories, like sort of just like two different versions of how of the history of the people. They can coexist when you're living in different places, but once those refugees come into the South, those two stories have to be reconciled. A little bit like American history works this way too, like sort of like different versions get told, and those versions can coexist until you have like TV or national media or something where like suddenly everything has to you have to reconcile those two because everyone's hearing it at once, right?
Your kids studied the War of 1812.
Oh, in Canada? Yes.
Who won?
Yeah. Right. That right. Yes, absolutely. In Canada, the Canadians won, or the British won, and burned the White House, and it's sort of a war of American aggression. And American histories tend not to tell it as a war of American aggression. And we actually would visit, or these kind of parents would visit War of 1812 sites. We was also there in 2012, so it was like a time to do it. Like on either side of the border, because there was fighting like all along the Niagara Peninsula and things like that, right? And you would see like different versions of the story being told in different places, like that. So absolutely, that's a perfect example. Civil War is the other perfect example. That's more loaded. I'm not getting that excited about the War of 1812. So this, if you're reading this stuff, you would guess, and with this, I'll transition back to the text. Elohim is more commonly used in, like Friedman would say, with text from the Northern Kingdom, and Yud-He Vav-He is more commonly used with text from the Southern Kingdom. If you remember last week, like the Elohim is a little more justice oriented, and Yud-He Vav-He is a little more human and mercy oriented. 10, verse 10. And Noah fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, Nifat. By the way, there's 2 versions of the stories why occasionally you get what they would call doublet, like that. Like if you before the interlude of the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the children of God, or the children of the mighty, or whatever that is, consorting with human women because they're beautiful and that whole thing. Like just before that, we had Noah having 3 sons. Now we're getting it again. Why? I mean, possibly because you got 2 different sources, right? And they're just 2 different versions of the story being stitched together. 11, the earth was corrupted before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So that's that's the trigger, as it were. And God saw the earth, and look, and look here, it was corrupted because all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. Hine is often, like King James translates that as behold, but we don't say behold. So he translated it as here, which is closer to how people talk now, which is like that what Hine is doing. Like if I say, here, look, blah, 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 but I'm using that as a way of saying, pay attention to what I'm about to say, or like the more commonly we say, look. And look doesn't have anything to do with the eyes. It's like, look, here's the story. They have to bring an indictment. Whatever, that's for more. But whatever the case may be, like you say, look, and it just sort of is highlighting what you're doing and as asking you to snap out of the perspective you have and go into a different one. When the Tanakh uses it pretty frequently. It uses it as switch your perspective to the character that I'm saying. So when it says hine, it's like, look, it was corrupted. And that it's like saying God's perspective is that it's corrupted. And like or you'll say, or we'll see it in the Passover story. Bat Paro looked in the basket and hine, there was a child. Like, it's like when it says, look, there's a child, you switch to her perspective. The camera switches to her perspective and you're like, oh, it's a child. And you're seeing it from there. So the hine sort of like triggers you that way to switch to the perspective of that character. Here, it's God. All flesh had become corrupted its way on the earth. 13. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me. Elohim lanoch kates kol basar ba lefanai. Ki malea aretz chamas. Because the earth is filled with violence because of them. And here, vehinani, I'm destroying them with the earth. Period. So God decided that all flesh is corrupted and violent on earth, and I'm going to destroy them. What's the link to everything that came before? Well, the immediate link. So Hamas is our answer. What's the answer? It's violence. But the violence seems to be driven by that interlude of the beginning of chapter 6 and all the weird stuff that we prefer not to talk about. The heaven and earth relations, like those sexual relations between the Bnei Elohim and the daughters of humankind, and that triggers God to say that everyone is bad all the time. So it's not just them. That's just sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back. But it seems to be that absent any clear law of restraint, people are violent. That's I think the plain sense of the text.
Okay, but what's the story with the animals? Why there's an implication the animals are doing something bad.
Correct. And so it doesn't say what that is. But it doesn't say all humans are bad. It says that in the lead-in at the beginning of chapter 6, but it doesn't say it here. It says all animals. And I think the answer to that is Genesis 1:30. Or like in the text. The rabbis will have midrashim on that the animals were themselves miscegenating and fooling around with the wrong animals, and that's why they got zapped. But Genesis 1:30, I think, gives the answer to what it is, which is right after saying that to humans, it'll be food that you should eat seeds and the fruit of the tree. Then Genesis 1:30, and for all the wild animals of the earth, and for all the birds of the skies, and for all the creeping things on the earth, everything in which there is a living being, every plant of vegetation for food. So the animals are given one restriction. And what's the one restriction? Eat plants. And the implied part of that restriction is, and not each other. So if animals are given one command and they're wiped out, then the implication is that they're violating the one command. Right, or the majority of them are being wiped out, like humans.
But the implication would be that they can start all over again.
So when we get to the end of the Noah story, we'll see the new status of animals. Animals are going to be given a new status, just like people are going to be given a different status. So the animals are being all but wiped out, right? The same way that people are going to be all but wiped out. And Noah and Noah's family are saved, right? So the frame is Adam is given, as it were, one command, doesn't follow it. And Cain, remember, like God again in this great moment sits and is like, don't kill people. But the implication is Cain's supposed to know that he's not supposed to kill people. But does he know that really? Not really. He's supposed to know that this is wrong. but doesn't, but is unable to act on that. If he knows it, is unable to act on that. And the implication is that's true for everyone else, right? That there's violence that's filling the earth. You're supposed to know to be good. You're supposed to be internally good, but basically good inside. Doesn't seem to be the case. So God's like, this whole thing's a failure. I'm starting over. And at first it's like, God says, I can wipe everyone out. But then it's like, I'll wipe everyone out except the one family that seems to be good.
Do you have any idea how many people are alive with this?
We do not have a count. No, I'm not even going to say more than 10 or less than 3 million. Like, no, I don't think, because I don't think that's part of the story.
And I mean, maybe this is something I should already know, but the three sons of Noah, do they have an ongoing story?
Oh yeah, we'll get there. Yep. We'll get there. So yeah, but the short answer is yes. So animals are being destroyed. Why the animals? Presumably they're not following the rules either. Whatever rules they have, they're not doing it. So they'll be all but wiped out. Yeah. And this is God again, like starting over. It's a second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever you want to do, creation. Verse 14. Asalach tevat. It's a gopher. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. So among other things, one ark, as we say, very importantly, it's an ark. It's not a boat. It's not a boat because you're not going anywhere. Boats are made to go somewhere. The ark is made to float aimlessly because there is no aim. Everyone is at the mercy of the larger situation. There is no destination. The whole point is that you are at God's mercy and not in control. So that again is a comparatively important point. The only other, as I mentioned before, I think the only other teva, the only other ark in the Tanakh is the basket that Yocheved puts Moshe into. There are two arks. One is this one, which all life depends on. And the other one is what Moshe is placed into, which the author clearly wants us to think all life depends on. Right? This is part of like the sort of like beautiful literary structure, right? And just as that sort of like, the world like depends on everything floating in this ark, the world depends on everything floating in that ark. So yeah, that's the
Also says the ark was of cypress wood.
cypress wood, gopher wood. There's a right, because what's gopher wood? Gopher wood is like is the Hebrew on that. This guy, the JPS, I think. So cypress wood is a rock with God, all flesh, and sterling with the earth. Gopher wood. This otherwise unknown type of wood is also certainly referred to a coniferous tree of great durability. What do you say, cypress?
Mhm.
So yeah,
Residence wood, which would not probably cypress.
right. Talmud identifies it with cedar. Many modern scholars prefer the cypress, both because of its similarity in sound to the Hebrew, and because it was widely used in shipbuilding in ancient times due to its resistance to rot. Right. Ark term suggests a box-like craft made to float on the water, but without rudder or sail or any other navigational aid. Does not use the services of a crew. The use of teva, ark, is intended to emphasize the fate of the occupants is being determined solely by the will of God and not to be attributed to the skill of man. By contrast, the hero of the Mesopotamian stories builds regular ship and employs boatmen to navigate it. we'll do the Mesopotamian stuff another day, not today. It's do the text on its own merits today. 14, make yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms within the ark and pitch it outside and inside with pitch. And this is how you should make it. 300 cubits length of the ark, 50 cubits its width, 30 cubits its height, right? So it's a rectangle, right? It's a rectangle.
Rabbi,
Or a cube, yes.
interesting Hertz comment.
New?
The rabbis say that the construction of the ark occupied Noah for 120 years in order to give his contemporaries an opportunity to repent. Their curiosity would naturally be aroused by what Noah was doing. He would answer their inquiry by warning them of the judgment which God was bringing on mankind. 120 years it took to build the ark.
120 years it took to build the ark, and you think the Gateway Tunnel is taking a long time. Right. So by the way, so good midrash. What are the rabbis doing with that midrash? So one, again, note the midrashic opening. Like it doesn't say how long it took to build it. So they're filling in that detail. Doesn't say what does Noah do to be a tzaddik? How does this midrash answer that question? A, wasn't corrupt. B, but it's not just that. The midrash that Richard cites actually gives you an answer.
He sticks to it.
He actually warned people. Like you, like
He allowed them the opportunity to repent.
right. He actually, he allowed them the opportunity to repent, gave a warning. In the text, Noah, Ish Tzaddik, he's a good person. And to say that he's not violent feels like insufficient. Not being a bad person does not make you a good person. It just makes you not a bad person. Those aren't identical. So the midrash makes him a good person. What did Noah do once God told him, I'm going to destroy the world? Noah's like, let other people know. Or even more better, rather than standing on a street corner with the sign like in a cartoon, the world's going to end, people come up to him and they say, what are you doing? It's like, well, things are going bad and I'm preparing because God's going to destroy the world. And like, but because I'm not violent, whatever it might be, I'm getting saved. And you should do the same. But
That's just a midrash, that's not.
well, two things. One, I don't like just a midrash as a phrase. It is a midrash. Not just. It is. I don't know. What do you think the rest of it is? Everything's a bit yeah. So I mean, what I'm saying is like it's so it's a so it's a midrash. It's worth knowing it's a midrash, but not just
I'm talking just that one little paragraph.
Yeah. So that sort of that paints Noah in sort of a brighter light. 16, you shall make a window for the ark, shall finish it to a cubit from the top, and you shall make the ark's entrance in its side, right? So light and air gets in, like above the water level, presumably, and a door to get in. She'll make it lower, second, you should make lower, second, and third stories for it, 3 levels. 17, and here, I'm bringing the flood. Mabul, by the way, again, a word that isn't used for flood later. This isn't what happens to your basement. It's a unique event. It isn't the word that's used for flood in other situations.
Rabbi,
Yes.
would you take a minute and explain the value that you see in Midrash?
Okay, that's a question. Yeah, 1 minute. 1 minute. So in 1 minute or less, Midrash makes sure that the text remains alive. Midrash fills in blanks in the text. Midrash is an essential element to understanding the text. People read Midrash into the text whether or not they know they're doing it. There is no text on earth that doesn't have interpretation put into it. This is just a way of making that explicit. And Midrash is an essential part of having a textual tradition, which is to say, it allows us to read in the text and to imagine what's going on with it. There is a Protestant bias that originates with Martin Luther of saying that the Bible is the so that's my on Midrash. That's my minute. Now I'm in the second minute.
Thank you.
Related and different topic. Martin Luther says sola scriptura, that you only rely on the biblical text and everyone should read the biblical text. That privileges the biblical text to a higher degree than what the Jewish tradition traditionally has put on it. So the Bible is in a is what matters, and everything else is lower. And Luther used that to sort of take a swing at the church, which had its interpretive, the Catholic Church, which had its interpretive mechanisms, and which was corrupt. And, you know, fine, the church was corrupt in 1517, and, you know, still has got a few issues. So, fine. Most American Jews grow up in a Protestant, most American non-Orthodox Jews grow up in a Protestant mindset. So they think the Bible is, the word of the text is what's important. And when you say Midrash, I say, oh, that's just a bunch of rabbis talking. And I don't know. My disagreement with that perspective is probably apparent. It's not that's not how we read it. We read both at once, and we have a tradition that, like, the Midrash was given at Mount Sinai, that God reveals like these things to people, like this sort of like that's, or the system certainly is revealed at Mount Sinai. Like they're sort of like they're concurrent and they exist side by side. And to me that's super important. The Bible as a sine qua non, and like more important than the rest of it is just Midrash or a bunch of rabbis talking or whatever it might be. Like to me that not my shtick.
Rabbi,
Sure.
the question I have is, it says the corruption was that living things were prone to violence, but isn't God using violence against them in the form of the flood? Drowning is not a real good way of dying, you know. It's almost like he's saying, you guys have sinned because you're violent, but I'm going to be violent, but I'm not sinning.
Right. I mean, this is how everything works, right? I mean, to flip to the end of the story, it's going to recommend that if you if you murder somebody, then you get capital punishment, and you can say, well, this is just I mean, that's just that's how punishments work. You can say stop being mean to your brother, and then, you know, you go sit in your room for whatever it might be, like sort of like, oh, but now I feel you're being mean to me. Like this is just, yeah. Anyway, that's just that's just the way the world works. I think is that you're doing that. God could, I don't know, like what do we want God to do here? Non-violent, punish them, give them a timeout.
In the original story of creation, he just said, poof, you're there. And he could have done, poof, you're not there. But instead, he's using violence.
Yeah, I would say the implication is that's not the way God works. Or, yeah, I don't know if poof, you're not there doesn't isn't indicated to be a power that God has. I can't think of an instance of like that being used or that being suggested. So later interpreters that are influential in, again, sort of will say that, well, God can do anything. Again, it's not necessarily what I see in the God of the book of Genesis. So I don't know if Pufkinot there is an option. And also, they're being punished. So, you know what? They're being punished. When they're being punished violently or painfully, sure. And that's part of it. At least I think that's how the story reads it. And so yeah, again, verse 17 sort of like makes that apparent. Kol basar asher bo ruach chaim b'tachat hashemayim kol asher ba'aretz igva. And here I'm bringing the flood, water on the earth, to destroy all flesh, which is the breath of life from under the skies, in which there is a breath of life from under the skies. Everything that is on earth will expire. Again, it's explicitly a punishment which isn't supposed to be lovey-dovey. 18, and this is then what's important, what will come next. 18. The akimoti et briti itach, and I shall establish my covenant with you, and you'll come to the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. The covenant, by the way, is the key lens in which to see what's going on. Covenant is the essential part, right? And all the living of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of each into the ark to keep alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds by their kind, of the domestic animals by their kind, of all the creeping things of the ground by their kind. 2 of each will come to you to keep alive. And you take some of every food that will be eaten and gather it to you, and it will be for you and for them for food. And Noah did it. According to everything that God commanded him, he did so. So again, Noah, follows orders, does exactly what he's told, like the Midrash, or like that Richard said, like spells out a bit more, but like that's like that, this is what we're given. And the key thing is the brit, the covenant. This system, and we'll see this as it plays out, will be really explicit at the end of the Noah story. The system God had initially, which is the Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel system of hope that people act on their better impulses and hope that they have an internal moral compass, was a system before. That's not working. That's being wiped out. And we're starting over with a good person, and we're going to ask limitations on that person. And that's the brit, the covenant is going to be, among other things, like a set of limitations. You human are incapable of just knowing the right thing internally. You need external law to guide you. And that, by the way, is what the line was in the story of, again, the children of God and the attractive daughters of humans and things like that. And God's response when God sees that going on, they took women from all they chose, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said, my spirit, or my law, my rules, won't judge in humans forever, since they're also flesh and their days will be 120 years. That people on their own can't judge. They need an external judge to tell them what the rules are. That's the brit to this. 2 of every kind onto the ark. Noah does so. Pause. Do I get to keep going?
No fish? No fish on the ark.
Why not?
Because they can live in the water?
Well, right here, I would say the one like people like getting hyper literal with the Noah story. There doesn't seem to be a significant concern for freshwater fish.
But they didn't get destroyed then.
Right. The I can see everyone like loves to think about, oh, what's life like on the ark? The biblical author totally disinterested in life on the ark, not an area of concern at all. So you can midrash it all day, but the text itself is disinterested in the goings on the ark. And again, we would say there's a midrashic opening that you can like spin stories of what's going on there, but the text is not interested. The up to this point, by the way, again, today the text hasn't referenced Yud He Vav He. It's been Elohim speaking in what up to this point is the longest soliloquy that God has had in the Torah so far, by far. Like what we just heard, that back end of chapter 6 is the longest quotation that God's had. Now Yud He Vav He, and Hashem says to Noah, "Come, you and all your household, into the ark, for I've seen you as a virtuous in front of me in this generation. Of all the pure animals, mikol habehema haTorah tikach lach shiva ish ve'ishto. Take 7 pairs, man and his woman, and of the animals that are not pure, 2, man and his woman." By the way, this is when you look at the 2 stories. When it's Elohim talks about male and female, zachar v'nekeva. Curiously, sort of notice here, Friedman wants to like get it right. Yud He Vav He speaks of the animals ish ve'ishto, man and his woman, or man and his wife, referring to animals, right? So to that, and here notice the pure animals. Noah seems to know what those are, or the assumption is Noah knows what those are. 7, not 2, right? And of the impure animals, 2, not 7 pairs. Or 2, not 7. The 7 pairs as opposed to 2 total, right? So 14 of pure animals, 2 of impure animals.
Thank you. I was just gonna say
Right here, it says that they're for sacrifice.
Where does it say they're for sacrifice?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Alter's book says it, but notice the text, right? So again, like this is why I say like everything requires interpretation. So we sort of know that, but notice that it's assumed that Noah knows that, even though God has not asked for any sacrifices.
But if you were reading this, you would say, oh, this is they're telling me clean animals and not clean animals, what can we when we can?
I, the Israelite reader, would know that, but I, the Israelite reader, am living in a society where these things are already known, right? Like if you're reading like with the text, right? Meaning that if you're doing that thing that you sort of like do when you read history, like when you're like assuming what would the character know in the time without the benefit of hindsight that I have, Noah just seems to have known. God never asked for a sacrifice until no.
Yes, he just did.
Correct. Noah offers a sacrifice, but God has not asked for a sacrifice. God won't ask for sacrifices till much later. Exactly. That's part of what's So what it's supposed to mean is like such is sort of a good question. Does God assume that Noah's going to spontaneously want to bring a sacrifice? Because that seems to be what happens. Like that, oh, afterwards, Noah's going to want to do this, so, and he's going to know that you can only bring a pure animal, so we better have more on hand. But God does not ask for the sacrifice. It just is that, yeah. So, and again, why how he knows what's tahor and tameh isn't clear, but he knows it. But 7 pairs, also important, doesn't make into the kids' version. 3, also the birds of the sky, 7 pairs, male and female, to keep seed alive on the face of the earth. For because in 7 more days I'll rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I'll wipe out all the substance that I've made from the face of the earth. There's the rain, wait for the not rain. 5. And Noah did according to all that Hashem had commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood was, water on the earth. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him came into the ark from before the waters of the flood. By the way, the rabbis learned from this, good midrash. If you read how they go on the ark, it's different when they go off the ark. You're smiling, you know this one. They go on the ark in this order: Noah and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives. And when they come off the ark, if I have this right, it says Noah and his wife and his sons with their wives, meaning they go on the ark separately by gender, and they come off the ark together. Why? Because on the ark, while everyone is dying, you know it's not appropriate to do? Be with your spouse. Because everyone's dying. This isn't the time or the place. Afterwards, they're going to have a command, be fruitful and multiply. So then, fine. But on the ark, not fine. So notice that, so the rabbis, so that's sort of the midrash, like, so the midrashic opening. Why do they go on the ark in a different order than they go off the ark? To teach you this lesson about when it's appropriate to have sex and when it's not appropriate to have sex. So on the ark, not so much. Yep.
So, further descendants who he was allowed to bring, or at one point it says he brings his family.
Oh, right. Like do his kids, like their grandchildren and cousins? Yeah. So the implication is no, because if you remember, like he has children late in life, as it were. Like when you read through like the all those begot stories, usually everyone's having kids like around 100 years old, and Noah is like 500 plus. So so Noah has kids, and few of them, and no daughters, late in life. So there doesn't seem to be grandchildren on the scene, and et cetera, et cetera. There will be, but there aren't now. And no cousins or hangers on.
Yeah, well, if you trace the numbers, you're saying he couldn't have taken 120 years to build the ark, because it was 500 when he had his kids, climbing the boat. Then God says, build an ark, and suddenly it's in the 600th year.
I think that's exactly where they get the numbers from, right? The Noah was 500 years old, and Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Yafat. And he's 600. He's 600 when the flood begins. So because right, yeah. Right. So I mean, could be, meaning that you're right. Does it mean do we have to think that that God is speaking to Noah happens? I would suggest it happens before he has kids, but it's not totally necessary. And Noah, 8 of all the animals that were pure and the animals that were not pure, and all the birds and everyone that creeps on the ground, they came by twos to Noah, to the ark, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. Now we're back to twos. Verse 10, and the 7 days later, the waters of the flood were on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, in the 17th day of the month, on this day, all the fountains of the great deep were split open, and the apertures of the skies were opened. That's the not rain part. That's the primordial water that from the book of from the first chapter of Genesis, flooding back into the world, right? Like that's the dome, as it were, that the earth exists on, being pierced. So those primordial waters are back in. This is the part where it's not really rain, it's just the waters of chaos. The great apertures of the skies were opened, and there was rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And this very day, Noah came, and Shem, and Ham, and Yafat, Noah's sons, and Noah's wife, and his sons' 3 wives, with them to the ark. They and all the wild animals by their kind, and all the domestic animals by their kind, and all the creeping things that creep on the earth by their kind, and all the birds by their kind, all the fowl, all winged things. And they came to Noah and the ark by twos of all flesh, that was the breath of life. And those that came were male and female. Some from all flesh came, as God had commanded him, and Adonai closed it for him. That again is this God closing the door, sort of sealing them into the ark so that they can begin their floating. Richard L. Friedman has like an illustration of like what it looks like, right? Which is again the world, as it were, is like a dome, described in Genesis 1. Dry land exists here, and there's a primordial waters surrounding it, and there's the Rakia Hashemayim, the firmament, like this sort of exists above, and that's sort of like there's air and there's dry land separated from these primordial waters of chaos, and that's what was described in chapter 1. And what God is doing here is reversing chapter 1. God is going back on creation and piercing the water below and above, so that those primordial waters flood back in. So again, it's less that it's just rain. It's that primordial chaotic waters are flooding back the earth, returning it. Exactly. This is going back to what the world looked like before Genesis 1:1. Before we started the story, that's where we're going. So that's part of what's going on. And Noah, in this box with all the animals, are sort of like are withstanding the reversal of creation. The 17, and the flood was on the earth for 40 days, and the waters multiplied and raised the ark, and it was lifted from the earth. Again, because they're not sailing, they're just floating. 18, the waters grew strong and multiplied very much on the earth, and the ark went on the face of the waters. Again, just aimlessly floating. 19, the waters had grown very, very strong on the earth, so they covered all the high mountains that are under all the skies. 15 cubits above, the waters grew stronger, and they covered the mountains. And all flesh that creep on the earth, of the birds and all the domestic animals, of all the wild animals, of all the swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all the humans, expired. Everything that had the breathing spirit of life in its nostrils, everything that was on the ground, died. 23. And he wiped out all the substance that was on the face of the earth, from human to animal to creeping thing and to bird of the sky, and they were wiped out from the earth. And just Noah and those who were with him on the ark were left. And the water grew strong on the earth 150 days. So that's
Here's a midrash, Rabbi. I created a midrash. If everything was destroyed, the earth was sterile. And yet, it's not sterile now. Where did the bacteria come from? Where did the viruses come from? They came from the microbiome inside the animals and inside humans, and the latent viruses to repopulate the bacteria and viruses of the earth.
right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
This is from the doctor.
Right, exactly. There you go. I mean, the earth in theory, we know eventually the water is going to come down, and the earth will be exposed again, presumably well fertilized. from all of the carcasses that are going to be strewn about on the earth. But yes, the definitely, Richard, if you want viruses and microbiome, it is not in the text itself. You're in the realm of Midrash. Which on some of is exactly it. Like it's like reading back in. So to create the parallel for the two comments you've made, like where do I find the viruses or the bacteria and such like this? Like you know about that now, so you read that back into the story. Rabbis, again, for the early one you cited, are uncomfortable with Noah being a tzaddik and saved, even though he didn't warn other people, because we have a command later in the Torah, don't send idly by. You're supposed to help people out and warn them of things they don't know and like be nice to them in that way. So like that, and he didn't do it. So again, they create a midrash. I know that the right thing to do is this, so I'm reading that back into the text.
The idea of the flood, from what I read, is more ancient than the Jewish calendar. It goes back to the Ice Age.
I'm right. Yeah, next time we can do like the comparative religion aspect of it, the like Mesopotamian versions of it. So yeah. Let's we'll do the look at like some parallels next time. First, like just again, like on its Noah, like from a couple angles. One was the critical perspective. Next time we can do the like Mesopotamian parallel perspective. This time, just the story itself. We got a couple more minutes. Let's hit chapter 8. All right, yeah, we can. And God remembered Noah, V'zachar Elohim et Noach, and all the wild animals and all the domestic animals that were with him in the ark. And God passed a wind over the earth, and the water decreased. And the fountain, where by the way, where else does the wind affect the water? It's splitting in the sea, right? And the fountains of the deep and the apertures of the skies were shut again. That primordial water back into its place, and the rain was restrained from the skies, and the waters went back from on the earth, going back continually, and the water receded at the end of 150 days. And the ark rested in the 7th month, and the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat, right, Asia Minor. And the water went on receding until the 10th month, right? So it's 3 months of right there of like waters receding, right? So everything like it takes a long time for things to return from the chaos in which they had existed, right? And the water at 5, and the water went on receding till the 10th month, and the 10th month, on the 1st of the month, the tops of the mountains appeared. And it was the end of the 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made, and he let a raven go, and it went back and forth until the water dried up from the earth. And he let a dove go from him to see whether the waters had eased from the face of the earth. And the dove did not find a resting place for its foot, and it came back to him to the ark. The waters that were on the face of the earth, and he put out his hand and took it and brought it in with him into the ark. He waited still another 7 days, and again he let a dove go from the ark, and the dove came back to him at evening time, and here was an olive leaf torn off in its mouth, and Noah knew that the waters had eased from the earth. So this is I can pause there, like at the end of verse 7. So this is the slow waiting and pausing till something comes back, and the whole like psychological experience on Noah is like goes unremarked on. Like Noah is a very flat character, unlike Abraham or Isaac or Jacob or Sarah or Leah. Like many of these characters have personalities. Noah, like not so much. He's just sort of like doing his job. There's like not much, sort of like not much going on there. So next time, the Brit, which is the key thing going on, and sort of like how does this like exist in relation to like other versions of flood stories? We can pause here. All right. Next week we'll be